wanted to wait a few minutes, but I think we might as well get started. I want to thank everyone who did adjust their calendar to spend time with us at the committee hearing today. We have 4 items. This is a special committee hearing, so we generally don't take public comment. But if you look at item, I believe it's item number 4, I made that so broad that anything that is neighborhood council related that you could speak on. So it's kind of like my substitution for, just public comment. Why don't we read the items, and then I will take comment, City Attorney, on the specific items. It's the general public comment that we're going to handle kind of in item 4. But so why don't we, Mr. Clerk, good to see you. Why don't we dive into this?
Oh, thank you, sir. Item number 1 is a communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Rosemary Llewellyn to the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners for the term ending June 30th, 2018. This matter may be considered for receive and file action inasmuch as the nominee has withdrawn her name from consideration.
Okay, so why don't we start off with, you said that was item 1, where she withdrew her name?
That's correct.
So why don't we start off with 2?
Item number 2 is a chief legislative analyst and city attorney reports and an ordinance relative to neighborhood council presentations during city council and committee meetings.
Okay, you know what? I'm trying to figure out the best way I want to do this. Mr. City Attorney, can I do on the items other than number 4 a minute, but do number 4 for 2 minutes?
That sounds reasonable, yes.
Okay. So that's what I want to. Look, don't disrupt the meeting. Okay, no, you did. I'm not going to take your comments. I'm trying to figure out a way to give extra time. Yeah, do not disrupt this meeting.
For the record,
if you do, I will send you outside and give Mr. Previn your time. That was a joke, Mr. City Attorney.
And for the record, you're speaking to Wayne Spindler, who was disrupting the meeting.
Yes, he can't help himself. All right, so why don't we start off with item 2, and I have Ann Job. Please come forward. And I have Commissioner Schaefer.
Hi.
Good
Hi.
afternoon. Good evening, early evening.
Good evening. I'm Ann Job, President of the Sylmar Neighborhood Council. On Saturday, the Sylmar Neighborhood Council held our elections. I touted our role as being the city government closest to the people, the most accessible to the people. We are the city's army on the ground. We are a volunteer army, and as such, we are saving the city vast amounts of money. But we are also an elected army. Please treat us like the members of the family. Let us speak for 5 minutes, since we speak on the behalf of our community.
Thank you. Commissioner, or I'll just say Leonard Schaefer. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, sir. Good afternoon, good evening, members of the committee. I just say I'm glad to see you're taking this up. We've had numerous people come to our commission meetings commenting on this, and how important it is to them. Some of them would like to use city facilities, but they're not even sure there's any in their area, so they would like to have the opportunity to know that they're actually there and could see if they could use them. I hope that...
You know what, Leonard, are you on the right item?
What? Which one are we working on?
We're on 2.
Excuse me, on the 5 minutes. Sorry.
Yeah.
I had my list prepared. Okay, with regards to that, I will say that our commission about 2 years ago already has a standing policy that persons who come speaking on an official item from their neighborhood council are given separate time of up to 5 minutes. We've already done that. So we're hoping that other agencies will pick up on that and go forward with it. And by the way, Mr. Wesson, I liked your initial suggestion some time ago that one of the best ideas would be to invite those types of persons, that is, they come speaking for an official action by their neighborhood council, to the table as though they are other city staff. I think that would be good.
Okay. You know, and I think this is kind of a work in progress, and but I appreciate the suggestion very much. So if I could have on item 2, Mr. Previn, followed by Mr. Spindler. Mr. Previn? On item 2.
Okay, it's Eric Previn. Thank you, sir. This is item 2. And as Schaffer explained, and many neighborhood councils have champed at the bit, this was a proposal to look at extending the time for neighborhood council people to give presentations here up to 5 minutes. So nobody likes public comments more than I do, sir, but I favor 2 minutes for all members of the public, whether they're from a neighborhood council or from a Studio City Residents Association or one of the churches or any of the other great groups that come down. And I also favor that even if they come down here after you've settled something up in committee or at least satisfied yourself in committee, I do favor that if they come to this hall, they get a chance to just simply weigh in for 2 minutes because of the parking, of the transportation. We're working on the DOT aspect, sir, but this is what I favor, and I appreciate your support for bringing more public comment to your constituents on Channel 35 in the life-size version. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Spindler, and if you want to speak, fill out a card or let me know somehow. Mr. Spindler, the floor is yours.
As usual, one lousy fucking minute. And that's the problem. We had this nice invitation tonight. Last night, Mr. Schaefer at the Bonk meeting said, we're going to have a nice thing tomorrow night. We're going to talk about this. You're not letting him talk. 1 minute. This is crazy. What is this all about? It's the same thing. People are mad. Should have heard them last night at the Bonk. Old people, mad. The problem is I can't get down here to your little dungeon down here. You got yourself isolated in your little dungeon. 1 lousy minute with your pimp over here telling me that I'm disrupting the meeting, and you're going to give my minutes to Eric Previn. Okay, here's what the Brown Act says. No. Fuck you, Herb.
Thank you. Thank you. I live for that, Mr. Spindler. Thank you. Okay. Do I have any other cards on item 2?
No other cards, sir.
Well, but I think I see one possibly coming. Floor is yours. Good to see you.
You as well.
Go ahead.
Just by the nature of the job that we have been given and being provided input from various different people in the neighborhood, in our communities, and especially representing not only my individual neighborhood council, but the Alliance of South LA Neighborhood Councils, which hopefully you guys will make some decisions, include that in the decision, allowing us to talk from the Alliance a few minutes longer as well. Being that we represent so many people and get that much input, I mean, it's hard to do in a minute. Whether it's city council, whether it's a committee, or whether it's some of the commissions, where we need to impart this information from various individuals. It's not just our individual opinion. So I think, considering we represent the city and stakeholders as well, that you guys should allow us to have a little bit more time. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for coming down. Lynella? No, who did I miss? Is that it?
Did you have a card, Margaret?
Yeah, I had a... So we're good? All right, why don't I bring up the CLA's office? And maybe we'll have the city attorney join at the table as well. But our questions are going to be directed to the, for the most part, to the CLA.
Good evening.
Good evening. Why don't you just kind of run through the thoughts of the department and what you went through to get to this point, and then we'll chime in.
Yes, my name is Chris Concepcion with the Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst, and with me is Carmen Hawkins from the City Attorney's Office. In August of 2015, as you'll recall, this committee instructed our office to report with options to provide the neighborhood council officials a separate time at any council or committee meeting to have a seat at the table and provide feedback on their community impact statements. In addition, the City Attorney's Office was requested to report with a draft ordinance to set similar time aside in a similar fashion at City Board and Commission meetings. The CLA report and the City Attorney report and draft ordinance are before you in response to that request. During the process of doing this report, our office has reviewed the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment's report, as well as the report of the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners. In addition, our office has evaluated various options which would allow neighborhood councils a seat at the table to discuss important city matters. While reviewing the council rules, we actually found that there's no provision in the council rules which would allow any city department or commission to speak at the presentation table during council or committee meetings. This practice has been more of an informal courtesy at the prerogative of the presiding officer. So in our review of the council rules, we determined that really the only placement for a provision like this would be under public comment, and we believe that that would be contrary to the council's wishes. So due to this, we have recommended in our report that the council implement a standing, formal, written council policy similar to other written policies of the council, such as financial policies, which would be consistent with the council's desire. This would specifically put neighborhood councils on equal footing with city department and commission representatives, while highlighting the specific importance of neighborhood council input by establishing a written policy. We have included the language for the proposed council policy in our report for your consideration, and with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, so why don't you just quickly walk us through, in the event that we approve this policy, how would things actually work?
So within the policy, we have set out a number of stipulations. So the policy would allow for any duly authorized member of a certified neighborhood council board in the city to address the council or a council committee on matters for which a community impact statement has been submitted. So this policy would require that the neighborhood council submit a community impact statement in order to be able to speak on the item. The opportunity would also allow for neighborhood councils to elaborate on issues raised in the community impact statements, and we believe this manner would be consistent with opportunities provided to city departments. Some of the more in-depth requirements would be, and they're not necessarily too in-depth, would be that at the start of the meeting, when the presiding officer invites the neighborhood council representative to speak, they would be asked to simply identify themselves for the record. They would be asked to identify the neighborhood council to which they belong. They would also be asked to identify any position that they hold on the neighborhood council. and at that point they would be allowed to address the council or the council committee for a period of time up to the discretion of the presiding officer of that meeting.
So whoever is performing the duties as the president that day would be able to determine, is there like up to 5 minutes, or is even if he or she wants more, they could?
Yes, there is no minimum or maximum time allotment in this policy, and we believed that would be important, so that way the presiding officer or the chair could allow that person to speak for as much time as as the presiding officer deems appropriate.
Okay, Mr. Harris Dawson, you have some questions?
Yes, we appreciate your work a great deal on this. I think it's one of the most important things we can do. It's a part of opening up this building and this process to as many Angelinos as possible. I had a question that actually came from a few of my colleagues in different committee meetings. Sometimes an individual get to the mic and say, well, I'm the secretary of X neighborhood council, but I'm speaking on my own behalf as an individual, and I'm disagreeing with my neighborhood council, or so on and so forth. So will there be a provision that makes it so people can stipulate the basis on which they're speaking? And if they're speaking as an individual, does this still apply to them? Would it not apply to them? So on and so forth.
Yes, this standing policy would actually require that they speak strictly to the position of the neighborhood council as contained in the community impact statement. So this policy does not necessarily allow for personal opinion or for any opinions or positions that are contrary to what's contained in the community impact statement.
And then multiple individuals from one neighborhood council in one setting, does this limit that, or does it leave it open?
There are no stipulations on the number of individuals which could be invited to the table to speak on these items, so that would be at the discretion of the presiding officer.
Okay, so that's something that if we have representatives that are here from whatever neighborhood council, and I could have 3 of them come and sit where you're sitting.
That is correct.
And have one person speak on behalf of the council with the other 2 maybe to chime in and give facts or figures, or I could say, why don't all of you speak? So we have so all of that is within the flexibility of the president.
Correct.
Well, what I remember, or not remember, but when I first opted to be the chair of the committee that oversees the neighborhood council, we, I guess, introduced a motion that had a series of things that we'd like to implement. Most of the things I got from neighborhood council people as I toured the city and sat down and met with them. And I think we've already moved forward on some. This, to a person, was a very important issue. So the action today will deal specifically with this, but we still will be getting reviews and analysis of some of the other things that we talked about when we talked about the ability to carry over funds. And so there's still a variety of things that we want to be able to talk about. I don't like to put the neighborhood councils in a position where they have to panic spend. You know, they feel as though, oh, we got 30 days and I got to, you know, we wouldn't want to do that. So, but this is important. And what I recommend, Mr. Harris Dawson, that we proceed with this as suggested by the CLA's office, knowing that this could be a work in progress, but it's a good start. And I don't want us to just, you know, putz around with this to try to make it perfect. And I already believe it to be good. So maybe the best way to see how it works is to put it in place. And I know there are conversations about alliances and things of this nature, but at this point, I think that this is what we can do. So I would like to suggest that we support this, but I would like to hear from, I have another bank commissioner, Eli, where are you? There you are. Come on up. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, sir, and I apologize for bringing it up a little bit late. And I just want to, first of all, thank you again for agreeing to chair this committee and for sticking with us for so long.
Thank you.
It's really appreciative, and thank you for all your hard work. I just want to say that we hear time and time again from the folks in the neighborhood councils that they really just want to feel a part of the city family. They want a seat at the table, and we've been working hard for 14 years. And, you know, I think it really, with this change, and it sounds like there's agreement on it, will really change the dynamic with the neighborhood councils, help people in the city treat them seriously, the people on the boards, the stakeholders treat them seriously, because they really do have that seat at the table with city council and can bring their issues to them. And really, they will, not only will you be able to treat the comments coming from the public, from these neighborhood councils seriously, because you'll know, oh wait, this was discussed in a public forum already. We're coming to you with our agreed upon time. I think it'll mean that it'll be more serious, their comment back to you.
Thank you. This committee is committed to do what it can to create a real partnership with the neighborhood councils. And I want to say that's part of the reason, Mr. Harris Dawson, why this item is before us. So before we vote, did you want to make a comment where it relates to the item itself, or do you want to just vote?
No, this is very exciting, exactly the kinds of things that we want to accomplish. So I am in complete concurrence with the chair on this matter, and look forward to it blossoming and us at some point coming back to the issue of alliances of neighborhood councils and regional bodies as well.
Do we have when do we anticipate, if we do support this, that it would go to council? Okay, so I could make that happen too. All right. So then, without objection, we will adopt a standing council policy in the city attorney's report and draft ordinance. So without objection, that'll be the order. So this is, in my opinion, a great congratulations to the neighborhood councils, because this is something that I've heard that you've wanted for like seven years. So we're glad to be able to deliver that for you. So now why don't we move to item 3, if Mr. Clerk, you could read that item, and I have some comment cards on that item as well.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. For item number 2, did you wish to have this in council on Wednesday, April 13th?
You know, that'd be a very appropriate day to do it then, because we've got a big meeting that evening. That would be good.
Okay, we'll go ahead and schedule it for the April 13th, Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 3 is motion Wesson Martinez relative to an instruction to the city administrative officer to report on available shared space for use by neighborhood councils with priority use of such spaces at city facilities.
Okay, let me try to, I kind of put these cards together. So, Ann, Job, Eli Lipman, Commissioner Schaefer, Margaret, Peters, let you guys begin to make your way. Hi.
President of the Sylmar Neighborhood Council, and I speak on behalf of the Sylmar Neighborhood Council. We've written a letter to you regarding this, that we feel like we should be considered when there is vacant city properties, that the neighborhood councils be able to utilize that property, be right of first refusal, basically. Sylmar has been without an office for the 2 years that I've been president. we simply can't, we simply don't think it's right for us to spend as much money as we would have to spend to rent at fair market value in Sylmar. So we're just biting the bullet and hoping that that this council that the city council will step up in this regard and help us do our job within an office. But right now we are homeless. And I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for coming down. You're up.
Thank you again. And I just wanted to say that I also support this motion. It's an issue that's come to us as the commission from neighborhood councils from across the city. And I think, again, it's about the neighborhood councils being treated as serious members of the city council community. I've been to neighborhood council meetings at crowded malls, at busy restaurants, where the noise level is so high that you just can't even hear the conversation that's going on. And I don't think that's a great location for a serious conversation about policy, which is what we hope all the neighborhood councils have. And so by opening this up and by bringing the city in and saying, okay, we have these spaces that are available, let's use it for the neighborhood councils, I think, again, we're just going to make neighborhood councils serious, more legitimate, more policy focused, and open to all members of the public. And I think, I think that helps city council in your public discussions, and I think it helps the neighborhood council. So please, I encourage you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. Margaret Peters, EC Southwest Neighborhood Council, and I'm also in support of using city facilities, empty city facilities, or available city facilities to house neighborhood councils for several reasons. As Commissioner Lippman stated, it changes the dynamic, I think, of neighborhood councils in terms of giving us more autonomy. It makes us seem more official, per se. Not that we don't already. We're fortunate enough to share our constituent center, but again, other neighborhood councils aren't as fortunate. And I think it only makes the system and the people on the board themselves that much stronger and that much more effective in dealing with the stakeholders in their area. So I encourage you to support it as well.
Thank you. Mr. Schaefer, followed by Lanella. Yes, sir.
Well, you've heard half my spiel already with regard to this. Let me say that my own neighborhood council, Tarzana, we were renting a location, and they decided that we should have an 85% rent increase, which would give us about 1/2 of 150 square feet at about $500 a month. We got very fortunate, and we are now using public space for both the storage of all of our materials and our committee meetings. We also have a great cooperation from one of the schools in our neighborhood where we get to hold our regular meetings. But there's a great number of neighborhood councils, and they have come and they have spoken to us, and they just have no place to go. And that's one of the big problems. I appreciate your efforts on this, and I point to one thing in your motion, Mr. Wesson, that was part of what we submitted. $200,000 or more being spent every year by neighborhood councils just doesn't seem reasonable.
Thank you. Okay. And then after you, we'll have Mr. Previn and Mr. Spindler.
Lonella Enix, Chair, EC Southwest Neighborhood Council, and as Margaret said, that we're blessed to be able to hold our meetings out of a constituent center by the grace of Councilman Harris Dawson. But for those that don't, we just find it kind of disrespectful, as in we're not a part of the city. If we're a part of the city, why don't we benefit from being able to hold our meetings in a city building if it's available? $200,000, or if, as a neighborhood council, to spend taxpayer money on renting somewhere when you should have the option to have it at a city building and hopefully not have to pay for it, should just be allowed, because it's disrespectful not only for taxpayer funds, but for us supposedly as a part of the city of LA. So I am in favor of this particular motion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Previn, followed by Mr. Spindler.
Yes, it's Eric Previn from CD2 Studio City. We We have some very fancy digs that we have on the CBS Radford lot that are completely gratis, paid for by the CBS marketing group, the people who run the signs and the TV shows. So this is fantastic, and I recommend it for anybody who can get that kind of action. But since most people can't, I do recommend using city property because I think that's much more important. I think that some of the great leaders like Andrew Westall believe that if we can use the city's resources appropriately and can put the neighborhood councils into, for example, the Parks and Rec Center, like Beaman Park, this can in a way put them to good use in the historic, there's a theater in the one on Beaman Park, or at Studio City Recreation Center. It's one of the only theaters in California. It's amazing. And we're going to protect it and get it designated as a National Historic Landmark, we think. We're going to try. We're doing that in connection with avoiding a high school regulation-sized basketball gym for Harvard Westlake, which Krikorian is getting a little dizzy out there in CD2. So what we're trying to do is keep him, hold his feet to the fire on that stuff and make it so that the people actually have a say.
Thank you, Mr. Previn. Thank you. Mr. Spindler.
It all began with the racist terrorist Felipe Fuentes, who went into Sunland, Tahunga, and deported them out of their office space. But last night, I learned he did it to another one in his district, in CD7. 2 neighborhood councils
Let's don't make this
evicted.
personal. Address the committee.
Keep interrupting my one lousy minute.
No, I held your time. I'm just telling you, direct it towards us. Go ahead. Go
I'm
ahead.
talking about why this issue came up. God damn, man. And, you know, this is why it came up before Bonk in the first place. That's where it began, the genesis. Then we learned that we got all of this city property while we're paying rent. And who's this rent going to? Campaign donor, third-party surrogate assholes. That's where the money's going to. More waste of money. We could be using our space. But instead of listening, you got people underneath there, hiding underneath your little cabinet down there, wondering how you're going to limit my minute. So anyway, I'll yield the remainder of my time once again with my famous saying, fuck you, Herb.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I live again, Mr. Spindler, for that. It just makes me feel so good when you say that. All right, that concludes public comment on that item. Oh, no, come on.
Hi, Councilman Wesson and everybody else. Hi. Okay, I was just getting briefed by my sisters in the Neighborhood Council, and regarding the motion of requesting city facilities, which we kind of talked about it with Councilman Marquise, of utilizing a facility or renovating it. But the budget that we have, by the end of the year, it's used up on members, stakeholders who come and request funds for very pertinent programs and events, and we want to support it because that's our purpose of being there, to be, you know, supportive of great activities in the community. So by the time all that is covered, we have very little money to pay rent, and I believe I heard someone say that their rent went up. Was it 85%?
You did. You did.
Yeah, and that's really
Thank you.
horrible.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, that concludes public comment on item 3. Do we have GSD or in the house? Why don't you come up and let us know how you would proceed with something like this? How do we, do that? In fact, before you start, Mr. Harris Dawson makes space available. I have done it for the whole time that I've been here. I have neighborhood councils that meet in my district office. We have neighborhood council that meets in a satellite office that is in the 10th district. We have neighborhood councils that meet at a rec and park facility, and I know for a fact that it makes their lives easier. And so when I heard this request, and the cool thing, Mr. Harris Dawson, about traveling and chatting with the neighborhood councils is you get so much good information. So the first time I heard this request, I was in the valley at Vank. And so I thought it would be appropriate if we would make an official request of you to look into how we would go about something like this and how feasible or what have you. So with that said, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Councilman Wesson, Councilman Harris Dawson. I first want to say that we are always anxious to assist any department that needs city space, but our priority is to city departments. And as we process requests from the various departments, we make sure that we are always clear on what our mission is. We've heard a lot of things this afternoon about the needs of our various neighborhood councils, but we have limited resources. Our primary building is, of course, City Hall. We also have the Fig Plaza property, Public Works building, and those buildings are filled with city departments. And the neighborhood constituent centers, most of them also have space spoken for. The ones that are not, maybe in disrepair, or they need to have significant amount of work to bring those buildings up to standard. I think that our issue is we simply don't have the available space right now to accommodate all of the city neighborhood councils. But beyond that, our department doesn't really make the determination who goes in space. It goes to the Municipal Facilities Committee, and they, through the CAO's office, will determine through a vote who will go in various spaces as we take the various requests.
Well, I appreciate your response, and it's obvious to me that you're taking this seriously. But I would think that we want to kind of broaden our analysis. I can't remember. It might have been Mr. Previn that referenced rec and park facilities. We have rec and park facilities throughout the city of LA. There may be some facilities that you technically don't control that maybe we partner with that department. There are library buildings that might have space available. So this is the kind of report that we're requesting of you, something that's a tad creative, outside of the box. We do, like I said, we do have rec and park facilities, many of which are open at night. Some daycare facilities. What else did I? Libraries and other. I just got a note. The CAO's office is here. So we're going to have you come up. We're going to put you.
And for the record, could you both state your names, please, and departments?
David Roberts, General Services, Property Manager.
Good evening, Leah Chu from the Office of the CAO.
But do you get what I'm talking about here? This should be a creative search. We should look at all of the, facilities, and we're talking about sharing space, not on a regular basis, maybe monthly. The possibility of storage. So what we need is a real creative approach, and that's why I think it has I believe we can succeed in doing this if we kind of broaden it, and the CAO's office works with the general services. So that would be what I would recommend be the direction of this committee. But I want to turn it over to Mr. Harris Dawson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your thoughtfulness on this matter. I also thank the folks from CD8 from pointing out the real gift that we have in the Mark Ridley Thomas Constituency Center. I think there are 3 or 4 neighborhood councils that meet there regularly. Neighborhood councils have a kitchen, they have an office. that they can use, so it works out very nicely for us. One of the challenges that we have even at the constituency center, though, and I think this applies to libraries, parks, police stations. 77th Division hosts a couple of our block clubs and neighborhood councils at different points in times. Certainly there are libraries that do the same thing. Two main things that I would ask you all to think about. One is, even at the constituency center, as nice as it is and it was built for that, if you go 5 minutes past 8 o'clock because of the staffing, it's some exorbitant amount that you have. There, folks are raising their hands. It's some crazy amount that has to be paid because of the staffing that is required to keep the building open. And it seems like that could be, especially if it's a neighborhood council, it seems like that fee, we could work that out in some type of way. So it would be interesting to explore that as well. Also, I experienced this a lot before being on council. So there's actually an abundance of public space. A lot of it belongs to the city, some of it belongs to the county, some of it belongs to other departments. And they all have a different process to access an empty room, right? So LAUSD has a whole set of things, and then the county has a whole set of things. I think it would be very helpful if the neighborhood councils had access to, or you all could, the CAO's office could help facilitate a process that at least tells us how to access those spaces, what the rules were, and then maybe down the line we actually work out a deal, because it makes no sense for people to drive past a school that's paid for with public money that's closed to drive to a private restaurant and pay them for space, but I understand there's necessary bureaucratic barriers to that, and they probably are put in place with good reason to protect against very, very important things, but it doesn't mean they can't be worked out. And so I would love it if you all could look at the sort of the intergovernmental relations piece of it on behalf of the city, and also the fees that are incurred when you go over the time in existing city facilities.
That's a good suggestion. And also you reminded me that I have neighborhood council meetings in the police stations that are in my regions as well. And, so I like where you're coming from on that, though, Mr. Harris Dawson. So what I'd like to do with this is I would recommend that without objection, we adopt this motion. And if you guys would kind of hop to it, and then my office or our offices will be in communication. And when you're ready with some type of a report, we'll ask you to come back and lay out your recommendations, suggestions, or just give us the facts. Is there anything else that you guys would like to say? And I appreciate you, I want to say this. I appreciate you staying and coming at 6 or after 6, because what we're going to do in this committee, we're not going to have all of our meetings at 8:30 or 9 o'clock. We will have weekend meetings. We will have meetings that start at 6 or 6:30. We'll kind of space this, change it up. And the only way that could work is with good people like yourself and good people like the staff over here that are putting in the extra time. So I appreciate that. And again, with that said, without objection, we will adopt the motion. Thank you. Okay, I have Mr. City Attorney. I think I have, even though we're going to receive and file item 1, I have 2 cards. I'd like to call them forward. Mr. Spindler and Mr. Previn on item 1, even though we're going to receive and file this issue.
Number 1, Rosemary Llewellyn withdrew from consideration to join Bonk at the last minute. And she was so qualified. A babysitter working on a master's diploma. Yeah. Now that's experience. What did you do?
I was a babysitter
and now I'm working on my master's. You meet the qualifications for running bonk. Bullshit. So she put her name out because that resume, that was not a curricula vitae, that was a fucking joke. So please, Mr. Garcetti, please nominate somebody qualified to sit on bonk. They have an open position. His name is Eric Previn. Put him on there.
Mr. Previn?
Thank you, sir. It is Eric Previn from CD2. And I wanted to just thank the mayor for appointing Rosemary Llewellyn. Llewellyn is a name we all know. Richard Llewellyn, of course, is the city attorney who works with the mayor very closely. And though I feel badly that Ms. Llewellyn is unable to serve on the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners, I want to take a moment to thank the commissioners, because of the public speaking tonight, I would just like to say about 75% of the public tonight are neighborhood empowerment commissioners, which is says a lot. It says a lot that we got such a big turnout tonight of commissioners. Now, why there are no other constituents here or neighborhood council board members, other than, of course, Fuentes' person, and I admire her tenacity and her willingness to keep after you to provide an office for her. It breaks my heart that they are homeless in Sylmar, because it just seems like she's been working as hard as anybody, Mr. Harris Dawson. Is there any way they could
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Previn. So on that item, we'll receive and file it. I guess we can just say without objection that item is approved. Now, if you could read item 4, Mr. Clerk.
Certainly. Item number 1 is a discussion item. Comments from the public, specifically regarding issues concerning neighborhood councils.
So that is a very broad. So I would be hopeful that all of you would come forward and you can talk about anything at all where it relates to the neighborhood councils. I'm going to start off with you, Mr. Previn, because you're the only card that I have at this point in time. So to the other folk, please submit your cards. I think you want to take advantage of this opportunity to just, if we're going to be really partners, I want to see you take advantage of opportunities that you're treated like a partner. So with that said, Mr. Previn, I'm going to ask you just come on, Mr. Previn, kick it off. You start. And Ms. Job, I hope you put in a card to speak on item 4. Speak anything on your mind. Yes.
Sir, it is Eric Previn from CD2, and I want to bring to your attention some matters that have taken place in the Studio City Neighborhood Council election 2016. There is a field of candidates that includes incumbents and challengers, like all neighborhood councils. And I think Schaffer was educating me a little bit about how this was all set up. And neighborhood councils, to refresh the memory, there are 96 plus or minus. They have sort of 4 guiding principles that all neighborhood councils are built on that foundation. And then each neighborhood council, Dion, is allowed to adjust them to the neighborhood specific. So we have had a very long tenured group in office, and they have been driving despite various kinds of objections. And the election process that's been launched this time with the help of the Dunn group got a little off the rails on the online side because there was a data leak and people got confused. And in general, what's needed is some simplicity and some kind of a resetting, because what has happened is that the incumbent group, possibly, I don't want to impugn anybody's motives, have managed to step on the 4 guiding principles. And this, of course, when you look in their manual and their bylaws, which Schaffer directed me to, points to one area where I never like to go early in a conversation, which is to the decertification page, sir. Now, obviously, that is not what anybody's expecting at this wonderful coming together of the community tonight at 6 p.m. But as Andrew Westall will confirm, because he listened chapter and verse and has been reading the emails and confirmed that he is really astonished at some of the things that have gone on in terms of using the city resources by the incumbents. There's a lot of concern, and I think the best thing for you to do, sir, if you could, and I know it's hard, would be to take the lead, kind of put together a task force, and just let all the candidates, both incumbent and non-incumbent, kind of reinvent the process like some of the more typical neighborhood councils that are more open, like in all the other districts where they have open voting. You don't have to vote only for one. Oh, you shut me down.
Thank you. Well, no, you're 10 minutes too. But I will say this, Mr. Previn, there's some merit, and I don't know what we can do where it relates to this cycle. But I do think that, you know, it's the first online. I do think we need to look into, I like what you said about simplify. And so we need to look at making some possible changes. So if I could get Margaret come back, Lanella come on back. Lady come back. Yes.
Again, I just wanted to quickly, I'm not going to be able to be at the meeting on Saturday. I apologize, but I want to quickly put my 2 cents in about funding. It's cumbersome. It's not very friendly for those of us that majored in liberal arts instead of finance in college. I really think that it's something that the city needs to work more closely with the neighborhood councils in terms of having the treasurers per se submit their paperwork and then they do it the way they want it instead of it constantly changing every month. Again, having been treasurer for the last 2 years, I do it one way. The next month they want something else. The next month they want something else. It's really hard to keep up with the constant changes. It's you know, that, and they're not fully staffed and done, so there's really no one to help you and guide you in terms of the procedure. So, you know, the city has tons of people in the controller's office, the Office of Finance. There are a lot of people in the city that can help us. I don't think it should be limited to done per se, but I think it's something that if the city wants it done in a particular manner, then they ought to have the professionals do it. I have no problem submitting receipts, paperwork, and working closely with someone who's trained in that area. I think it would be better for the neighborhood councils. I think it would be better for the city in terms of accountability. So it's something that I think, you know, as a committee, you should look at, and I would fully be in support of a change in that matter.
Thank you, and I'm sorry you won't be able to make
autism.
Hey, I get it, but because again of the travels, and I think I've done 3 meetings with Slank, but I've been all over. There's still like the harbor and some other areas where I haven't gone to, but the one thing that I hear at every meeting is that it is too challenging where it relates to being the treasurer, that some councils spend part of their budget to hire, and I don't believe that was the spirit or the intent. So what we're trying to do is start a conversation. Hopefully we can move with some haste, because I'd like to try to make some changes when we enter into the budget process. And we did the best we could to try to be fair. We asked every neighbor, every alliance to appoint a person or what have you. And I know everybody's not pleased with that, but we can't have 100 people at this kind of a meeting. So we're going to start out like that. And if we're not represented by certain areas, I'll appoint people, and we will begin this conversation in earnest. Every meeting that I've had in every area, banks, every area, this comes up. So we need to address that, and we're going to try to do that. Thank you. And I'll see you at the next meeting. Mr. Harris Dawson?
Mr. Chair, I just point of personal privilege because Margaret lives on my block. Quick question.
On your block?
On my block. Her grass is nicer than mine. How much time do you spend on average sort of reconciling the books and doing the financial reporting?
I try to discipline myself, but just on average, I'd say at least what, 5 hours?
Wow.
5 hours a week. 5 to 6.
Thank you.
Yeah, and again, that's, you know, I have to get the receipts and, you know, and just the challenge of the form itself. It took me a while to kind of get the hang of the form itself. And like I said, I have a liberal arts degree. I'm somewhat, you know, in terms of home budget, but the budgeting process, just to reconcile the books for a neighborhood council, it takes an accounting degree. It really does. It's that cumbersome.
Let's see where we can go with this. Okay, try to simplify it. And another thing that I'll just say that I found out that troubles me, I won't say upsets me, that troubles me is because of filling out the right papers and this, that, and the other. We have a lot of neighborhood councils that literally don't spend their money.
Yeah, and
Okay.
the reason they don't, it's because it's so
And the
complex.
reason why they don't is because of how complicated it is. And in the past, that money has been scooped up and then put back in the department. And
Yes.
I've even, which I will never agree to, I had neighborhood councils say, well, we spend all of ours, can we spend theirs? I said, no. No, you can't. We have to figure out a way so that you can spend it.
And I'm a brand new treasurer, so again, this, I
We'll
was
work on it.
totally new.
We'll work on it. And I can't think of one thing up to date that this committee has promised to do that it has not done. And we're determined to just, we got a bunch of items to peck away at, and we're going to do that.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Okay. Come on. Come on down.
Lonella Enix, EC Southwest Neighborhood Council Chair, and I have a wonderful treasurer.
Yes, you do.
We are a better than functioning neighborhood council because I have a wonderful treasurer. There are neighborhood councils that are not functioning because they are not blessed as such. And that affects our ability to be stable as an individual neighborhood council or as an alliance to go outside of, you know, that and do wonderful things. So a bad treasurer can shut you down. And she's my friend. I make sure she's my friend because there are things we need to do to make sure that, you know, we take care of the stakeholders. There are things like the event process. We're going to be putting on an event, and we have to make a budget that Dunn has to okay. Now, if I have a conversation with the councilman's office and we make decisions, it's still based on whether Dunn approves this event budget 2 days from now, a week from now, a month from now, and we're, you know, waiting for them to do what they need to do. I also wanted to say in terms of alliances, there's something on page 3 of this particular, we're under NC funding to city departments, where it says several of the alliances have funding accounts with the city and others want to establish funding accounts. You and the mayor have asked us as an alliance to put on a DWP reform meeting.
Yes.
To do that, to get a large enough space, it takes money. And we don't have time for every individual neighborhood council in our alliance to go back to their boards to ask for money so we can put this on. So that's one of the other ways that the inefficiency in funding doesn't allow us to do the things we need to do for the community. I have 7 seconds and I'm like stressed out. So,
No, but
you get my point.
No, I get it. But have we determined where we're going to have, because Slank is going to be a main host of the southern region DWP conversation. Have we gotten to a point where we decided where we want to have it yet?
Well, I'm waiting for your office to come back and give me the date specifically.
Okay.
But it's not only the space; it's the marketing.
Well, we'll do it quickly, and we will. If there's a cost, then on this one I'll deal with it. But I will factor in what you said, because I do think that is important. And also where it relates to some of the concerns that you highlighted and Margaret highlighted, we're going to have to try to come together as this working group or what have you, and we're going to make suggestions and recommendations that not everybody is going to like. But if it's to make things more streamlined, to make things function better, we're going to have to do that. So that's what this conversation is all about. And then we'll contact you quickly where it relates to where or. Okay, so in fact, I've just been informed that he planned on doing it when this meeting was over, so I'm supposed to shut up. Thank you. So if I could have Lady Cage come on up, and you will be followed by, I'm going to go with Miss Job. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, trying to think of a list of things we talked about in our meeting. Okay, for one thing, we were informed, actually it was mentioned to me that Dunn was considering or had talked about not allowing funds to be used for food during the board meetings and even for general meetings when the community comes early in the morning to participate in the activity. And if that's the case, I hope that they do not propose anything such as that, because people leave straight from work, go to the meetings, and they didn't have time to stop and eat, so you have to sit there, and it's not like you have a banquet. It's just snacks and things to have to get you over until you go home and eat your dinner. Then another thing is the cost of the election. Jay came to us and talked to us about the cost of the election for the neighborhood council, and he had proposed like $17,000 or so to be used for PR and posters and those sort of things. I'd like to know, is it possible that the city could do PR for the election, like at the radio stations or we had the city television station, and could they put like something on buses and seats and things to help us to, because we can't reach everybody. We won't be able to reach everybody. But if you put it out there, they can see it and know that there's an election. We pass out flyers and things, and again, we don't have that budget to have posters sent by the post office. We have to get out there and hit the ground ourselves. And then there is new people who will be coming aboard. Is it possible that the city could put together some type of plan to have like a workshop or a, I know they have the ethics.
To kind of training or ease them in. Okay. Thank you, because I have to, if I let you go longer, other people are going to want to go longer. But I will say this, and Mr. Harris Dawson, I don't know if you had a conversation about this yet, but I did. And I don't believe that it is mandatory that you spend money to promote the election. And if it were mandatory, I would probably have questions about that. I do think it's important that we have outreach and promotions. And we should probably, as we're creating this working group, that's something that we should talk about as well. It's kind of like we give you a budget, let's say right now, 42 whatever, and then in essence, if we're requiring that you spend whatever the figure is, then your budget really isn't 40. So we should kind of figure out a better way to do that. Agreed. So, okay. Okay, Ms. Job and Mr. Schaefer, Mr. Lippman, and we're going to end with the Mr. Is it Graber? Yes. Okay.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm exhausted. We had our elections last week on Saturday, and I'm sort of running on empty. And this is an amazing opportunity that you're giving us to just speak to you. So I'm not going to do it as well as I would have liked to. I want us to think in terms of best practices instead of so many rules and you must and you shall. Let's think in terms of best practices. Let's give us some guidance as to how we can best do our job. Mm-hmm. I'm on my third treasurer this year.
Wow.
And it is just a daunting task. And it's not because Dunn isn't doing their job, or there's nobody at fault, other than it's just plain too hard and too cumbersome and too many I's to dot. And that's where I'm looking for us to be nimble. I've used that word at my neighborhood council. If we could just find some way to be nimble so that when an opportunity comes up to serve our community, that we can grab it instead of have to wait until our neighborhood council's scheduled meeting and have a vote on it. Well, you know what? That opportunity's gone. We couldn't do it because of the rules. So I would just like us to get together, think about how neighborhood councils can be more nimble, less restrictive. Let you guys deal with the rules. Let us be on the ground doing the work that's immediately in front of us and not have to say we can't do it because we just had our meeting 3 days ago. And I thank you for this opportunity.
No,
I wish
thank
I were
you.
better prepared for it.
No, thank you, and get used to it. We're going to do this from
I'll be back.
from time to time. We want you to come back.
Thank you.
All right, Commish.
Welcome to our world of night meetings, which we do once every month, someplace in the city of Los Angeles.
We do night meetings every week. Okay.
We do them in San Pedro. In any event, first I'm going to put on my commissioner hat. I think we've had a couple of good years. You've taken up our recommendations. I think a couple of good years because we're getting support now. Our motions are being taken up by the committee. They're being acted upon. They're being acted upon in a reasonable manner. I'm sorry more people aren't out down here. I did send email to 1,800 board members about this meeting.
This is the beginning. It's not the end.
Understand.
Don't worry about it.
Understand. And I can tell you that we really appreciate the support that we're getting for the things that we're trying to do for neighborhood councils. We think that's great. Now I'm going to put on my neighborhood council president hat from Tarzana. Elections. It's really difficult to look at board members of a neighborhood council and say, by the way, we want you to go out and get 3 people to run against you. If we mention that to members of the city council, they'd laugh at us, and rightly so. Perhaps we should look at the department or somebody else, well, the clerk, but somebody taking over the elections for neighborhood councils. That is, the outreach for candidates, the sign-up of candidates, the outreach for voters and such as that. Maybe the money should come from the funds of the neighborhood council. I mean, that's a controversial thing, but if we set aside $5,000 to do outreach anyway, maybe that would be a good thing to do. But something should be done with regards to elections for neighborhood councils rather than relying on the current boards to do all that outreach and seeking candidates. With regards to financial issues, I guess we're really blessed. We've got a CPA, former CFO, as our treasurer. He and I work together on the financial matters, and we keep track of things and such as that. Some of the rules are daunting, but they get changed because they learn from experience.
Thank you. Thank you. You know what, Eli, before you come up, and to some of the neighborhood, the NC members that are here, it's been the last few weeks, Mr. Harris Dawson, that I've heard the challenges where it relates to elections. And everybody has an election at a different time and I mean, maybe if we had some kind of conversation about doing it around the same time or whatever, we could then come up with a way to do outreach because you have them all. So I know people want to, do it at specific times, and I'm comfortable with that. But that's something else we should probably, since we're having this conversation started by, Mr. Previn had concerns, so we should talk about elections. I think that's a legit topic for us to sit down and talk about.
I think you're exactly right, Mr. Chair. And the other thing I'd add to that discussion is if we have them around the same time, it gives us the opportunity to take advantage of free media in a way that we can't now, even our big city paper might run articles on neighborhood council elections if they were at the same time. Being spread over several weeks, even months, it's not likely to happen. And that's, I think, also the case with local neighborhood newspaper as well as radio stations and the electronic media as well. So I think it's a very worthwhile discussion to have and something that could prove very fruitful.
Yeah, and I agree we should definitely do that. Okay, Eli followed by Stewart.
And I agree with you. I think it actually might be a great idea to partner with us to do town halls about neighborhood council elections, get some public input, go out in the community, and then
That ain't a bad
discuss
idea.
it. Yeah, so and one of the things that, so I just want to put out a hypothetical. The city clerk came to you, Mr. President or Mr. Councilmember Harris Dawson, and said, we want you to go out and recruit the candidates that are going to run against you in the upcoming election. Now, you might take this as a challenge and go out and recruit candidates to run against you, but you'd probably laugh at them, right? That's what's happening right now with the neighborhood councils. And in some neighborhood councils, they're doing a really fantastic job of recruiting candidates. Venice Neighborhood Council had over 50 candidates in the last election.
Wow.
They'll probably have the same for this election. They just go all out, and that drives the number of voters. But in some neighborhood councils, they say, are you kidding me? And they spend zero money on the outreach because they just want to roll over the incumbency. And so if there is some way to be able to split that and think about that in a creative way, I think that we would create more, generate more interest in neighborhood councils, generate more candidates. Other areas that I think you guys, the Rules Committee can work on is websites. The department's been doing a great job. Stephen Box, he just left, but he's been doing a great job. But all the neighborhood council websites are privately managed. If we could bring them in the city family so that when a neighborhood council turns over the board and they lose control of the website, that doesn't become a problem. So the city can actually own and manage the domains. And then finally, what I'd love to see is, especially with this big sales tax that might be on the ballot in November that Metro's putting on, transportation lines cross neighborhood councils and your districts.
Yes.
We should be having transportation group like we have other neighborhood council advisory groups that cross boundaries on transportation, because one line is going to impact another neighborhood. So.
Thanks, Eli. And now you make me think of something else. I mean, the purpose of the neighborhood councils partly is to be inclusionary, is to try to get as many people to participate as possible. And in some respects, it seems like we're doing the opposite. I know when I look at some of the rules by some of the neighborhood councils, and I will not name them, it is obvious to me that what they're trying to do is make it difficult to run, difficult to engage. And that's, I don't think, what we should be about. So I do think we need to look at ways to kind of really open the barn door and try to get as many people in it as we can. Mr. Harris Dawson? You good?
Yes, I do note, I would also just say parenthetically, you might not want to let these politicians pick their opponents in races. They might jump at the chance, unfortunately, but I know I might. The issue you raised around transportation, I really appreciate it, and it's something we'll note, as both the council president and I have the Crenshaw line running through both of our districts, and there will be more in the future, and that's something that impacts a lot of communities across the city.
And Lanella, only one per subject. No. You have to get Mr. Harris Dawson and I before we leave or later. So, Stewart, the show is yours, followed by Mr. Spindler. Yes, sir. Welcome. Pleasure to meet you.
Same here, Chairman Wesson and members of the committee. Thank you for giving me time to voice my opinion. I'm a new resident. I moved here from England about 4 months ago. And I'm an American citizen, but I was transferred there many, many years ago to work in the private sector and enjoyed a very lucrative career in the private sector. But when I decided to return to the United States, I made a promise to myself that I wanted to serve the community in some way. I wanted to give back. So it was suggested to me. I purchased a home in Studio City, and I'm currently running to be a board member of the neighborhood council.
Good luck to you.
This meeting today in this chamber has been a revelation, and I'm very pleased to see that democracy is at work, and it's all looking good. What I've seen in the Studio City Council
neighborhood
is a little different, and you've already addressed some of it in your remarks. There needs to be a better way. There needs to be a more simplified, streamlined process. One of the planks that I've been running on to get people to consider voting for me is that I'm a firm believer in that you're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. And you have to decide, what you are. And persistence will win the day. And I know it's difficult to recruit people to be on some of these councils, but I, for one, really want to put my best foot forward. The election process has been absolutely appalling. The online situation was completely botched. The power block that exists, the incumbents, have made it very difficult for the newbies to join and to take up seats on the board. So I just wanted to get that on the record to let you know, and hopefully...
How so? If I could just ask a quick question. How have they made it difficult?
The first meeting that I attended, first Studio City Council meeting I attended, was a Meet the Candidates meeting. And when I arrived at the meeting with there were 20 other people there, about 7 or 8 of the incumbents had full color posters, that were humongous with their name
Okay.
and everything. And they were running.
I got you, Stuart. I got you.
And I just felt that to be unfair and inequitable.
I got you.
So I just wanted to make you aware of it, make the committee aware.
I got you. Your time. I did ask you the question, though. Okay, thank you for your answer. Mr. Spindler.
So he tried to take my card away. This becomes a hooded item. I gotta wear my hood. So once again, you showed what you're doing, acting like a thug, claiming my card wasn't turned in. I put in 5 cards, and you play 4-card stud with 3 cards. That ain't right. And all these neighborhood councils, they take after you. Not Marquise fine. I'm talking about the Wesson monster. All the gangsters out in the hoods, the neighborhood councils have become hoodlums. Like Studio City. I goes down there, I becomes the first black man in 40 years to get onto that CBS studio lot on Radford. How about that? Now, I saw other people, but they employees. I took a speaker card, and they said, you can't talk more than 1 minute at my meeting. And I said, I know where you got that from. You got that from Herb Watson. And that violates the Brown Act. Now, that asshole is no longer president. He's off the letterhead. But they serve you nice food, and they don't talk about nothing. They don't talk about anything like rate hikes. And all the people now that are going to have all their shit turned off because of 22.5% rate hike that you could have stopped. But poverty pimps don't stop poverty pimps. They keep going forward with more poverty pimps. And that's what everybody here knows now. And many other people were going to speak. I saw lots of people last night. I'm going to go down there tomorrow night at 6 p.m., but they turned on around the freeway because they realized if you come down here, you might have to start wearing a hood like me.
Okay. For those of you that there's nothing we can do where it relates to his idiocy, okay? You were afforded an opportunity to speak on every item on the agenda. And you come up, talk about us, and he's sitting out there with a hood on and a swastika. I mean, I really don't think that's what this city is about, nor, anyway, I tell you, as poor as what was that thing? A mine is a terrible thing to waste. Yes. Is there any more business, Mr. Clerk, before this committee?
Yes, there is, Mr. Chair. I understand that Councilmember Harris Dawson would like to amend the motion to request that his reports to the CAO regarding neighborhood council using space in city facilities after 8 p.m. and also using other governmental facilities be added as recommendations to the committee report. Without a doubt.
That, in fact, I'm sorry we didn't do that at first. Yeah, because it makes sense. So let's we move that as amended. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. This committee is over, adjourned.